Welcome to the Tactical Business Podcast. I am your host, Wayne Skalski, and today I have the honor of speaking with Sharon Preston. Sharon, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, it's a special day. It's actually my birthday today, so it's
Happy
a
birthday.
thank you. Yes, it's you're my being able to do this podcast with you is a great present. So, um,
Oh,
well, I'm excited to talk to you. I love the address of your website, ladiesoflead.com. But before we get to that, why don't you kind of go through a little background about how you got into the firearms industry, what brought you to the business that you have now, and we'll go from there.
excellent. Well, I started out with an equestrian center where I trained horses professionally for 20 years, and I had a bomb-proof academy. So I was training horses to be shot off of. And my son, who's in law enforcement, I'm a little older, so he was like, "Mom, you need to, you know, do something different with your life." So on Facebook, I started a group of, "Hey, any ladies want to learn how to shoot handguns?" And this was 13 years ago, a little over 13 years, and it just blew up. So I I contacted two male instructors, and in the interim, I traveled around the country and got all of my education and all my certificates and learned a lot about the industry. Same thing I did when I had the equestrian center. I traveled the country to learn from the best clinicians because our students deserve that. You know that your instructors are always learning, and so we had I, it blew up on social media. Started having classes, and all of them were full. But I kept being told, "Sharon, you got to get the males out of the classroom because the dynamics completely change." So at a point where I felt, comfortable enough to teach them myself, I went ahead and let the guys go. And then it just became women only. And oh my gosh, the dynamics completely changed in class. And I noticed that when the men were teaching, the women weren't as inclined to go ahead and handle the guns and take them apart and put them back together. They were a little bit submissive. And then when it was just women only, oh my God, the adult humor, number one. I mean, and then yeah, they were grabbing those semi-automatics and field stripping them, and instead of just the revolver. The revolver outside looking in is pretty safe. And so it really just changed. And then, the stories started happening in class of the brutality and the violence that women have gone through and how vulnerable they feel. And um, so that's how it started, was with classes. So then I just started selling some swag. I was downtown Redmond at a really great location. And then it started, some non-ATF things like stun guns and tasers and collapsible batons and knife pins and knife combs and different things. And then I moved out of that spot and moved to a shopping center 3.5 years ago where I got my FFL. So then I started, selling guns. But my gun store, it's really bougie. It's I have a velvet sofas and plush carpet where the women can come in and talk and share their stories with me. And then of course we have the business part of the store. I also have a laser shot system, which is a virtual simulation virtual range. Do a ton of training on that, which augments our live fire training. So my retail is mainly to add value for my students. Um, and so it's, gun sales in Oregon right now are down. They're really low. There's a lot of gun stores closing in Washington and Oregon. I think the last yesterday I put in through Oregon State Police that for the background, and there was only like 1,500 guns in the queue for the entire state.
Mm.
So gun sales are really low, and thank goodness that I don't depend on that for income. My income is mainly for training and teaching, which I do almost daily. I give huge classes on the weekends, and then I'm always taking people out to the gun range. I was president of the largest gun range in Oregon, Central Oregon Shooting Sports Association. But prior to being president of that gun range, I was the women's discipline director for 6 years. I'm range development and operations certified. I'm, of course, NRA certified. That's in Oregon. That's what you have to be to teach, instructor candidates. So I'm a training counselor pistol, rifle, shotgun, personal protection in the home, personal protection outside the home. I'm the chief range safety officer. So I've done the work, and I continue to learn. I'm always taking classes from other instructors because we never stop learning. There's always a different technique or something a little fun that you can a different way to teach something. Um, so it's been a great journey. I think what my whole pivotal moment was, I had a I when I had my equestrian center, I raised Arabians and saddlebreds, and so one of my good friends had she had a really nice Arab stallion here locally, and she was being threatened by she had taken in a young woman and her little boy from church, and the estranged boyfriend was threatening her, and she felt really uncomfortable. So she signed up for a class. 2 weeks prior to the class, the guy murdered her
Mm.
and in her home. And so that that switched me. So now have a moral desperation to reach as many women as I can before the danger happens. So when a woman calls me during the interview process to sign up for a class, I always ask questions. Do you feel safe? Um, and if they don't, then I get them in right away. So the stories that I have heard uh, of violence against women and how they survive just reminds me of how resilient women really are. But they need these tools to up the ante or to even things out and to be able to leave their homes again and feel confident outside the home. So that's kind of what I'm about. And I've been extremely successful with teaching while adding the element of having an FFL to, and I don't charge a lot over my wholesale price because a lot of these women are just getting out of really bad situations and they can't afford a lot either. So I don't make a lot of money on the retail side on purpose.
So there's a lot to unpack there. Let's start kind of on a macro level from the business side of things. Is why do you think that gun sales are down in Oregon? Do you think it's something that is industry wide, or do you think it's something that is specific to kind of where you are, or what
It's
are some of
it
the reasons you think?
it's industry wide, but it is state specific. So we had a Measure 114 come on the ballot a couple of years ago, which is still being fought in the court, which would mandate that you have a permit to purchase, okay, and a magazine ban. So it was fought on a state level and then on the federal level. So they went after the magazine ban on the federal level because that had already been adjudicated at the Supreme Court level. But
And then by a magazine ban, do you mean that
10
you
rounds.
oh only yeah, it's only down to 10 rounds. Okay. So
Yeah,
Like California basically.
right, which has already been, shot down. So the permit to purchase, you would have to take a proficiency class. You would have to go to a gun range. You would have to shoot a string of fire. We don't know at what distance, what target, nothing. Um, show proficiency in loading, unloading, locking, and unlocking your gun to be able to get this proficiency certificate. Now, this is outside of your concealed handgun license. So when this
Mm,
was voted on, it only passed by 0.7% because a lot of concealed handgun license owners in Oregon thought that it covered the PTP, the permit to purchase, but it didn't. It was the way it was worded. You know how they word those in the ballot measure books,
mhm,
and so it just barely passed. And so I got a hold of a national advocate for the ADA, American Disabilities Act, and he sent me all of these laws that this Measure 114 went against. You cannot create a permit that delays or denies immediate access to the process. So let's say that it's the middle of winter. There's no indoor ranges here where I am at all.
mm,
They're all outdoor ranges, and they can't afford to be ADA compliant on every bay. You just go, so you have to have your shotgun, your rifle, and your pistol bays because the lead, has to be documented latitude, longitude for reclamation at some point. So that would mean that every bay would have to have asphalt all the way up to the firing line to be ADA compliant. So I gave that to the president of the Oregon State Sheriff's Association. I gave it to the brother-in-law of the judge doing the state case, and that's still in the playbook to be brought out. But let's say that you're an elderly lady, you live out in the middle of Oregon. It's the middle of winter. Your husband passed away a year prior and you're in fear, of either large animals or people, and you want to get a gun. Well, you got to find an instructor. What are you supposed to show up to the gun range with? You don't even own a gun.
Right.
It's the middle of winter and she's in a wheelchair.
Does that extend to like hunting rifles as well, or just handguns or any kind of firearm?
Anything. To buy a
That's what I'm
firearm, you
looking
would
at.
have to get a permit to purchase. So I created a proficiency certificate and I sent the syllabus to the Oregon State Sheriff's Association. They approved it. So I've been teaching that. So with my certificate of compliance for the CHL and then the proficiency certificate, my students will be first in line to get that permit to purchase. However, the FBI has stated that they will not do the background checks for it, which is part of the mandate because they're already doing background checks for transfers of
Right.
newer used guns. And so it's redundant. They would have to hire, double the staff to handle that. So there's no one that's going to do the background checks for the PTP, and there's no taking into account what are these women supposed to show up with when they don't even own a gun. Now, I provide guns and ammo for my classes. They get to try out 8 to 10 different handguns, see what they like and what they certainly don't like, and then help them purchase that gun and then train them with that gun. But a lot of instructors can't afford to do that. They
Right.
don't have the ability to let them try a plethora of guns. So it's very limited. And so when Measure 114, back to the business end, when that all happened, I had a line out the door. I was selling, I don't know, 20 guns a day or more, as many as we could possibly process a day. And I think when that happened, everybody bought so much that now it's just ammo and
Right.
holsters.
So the demand was kind of front loaded there before the measure came into effect,
Yes, sir.
basically. All right.
Yes.
So you've got a kind of an unfriendly regulation environment.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got a situation to where you have this group of people who, they have a very specific need for guns. I do
Yeah.
believe there's a difference in the, between men and women with regards to the
Absolutely.
ability to defend themselves. I mean, I'm 6'4", 215 pounds, right? So
Yep.
that's,
Big
um,
hands.
yeah, and it's also just to be able to defend myself even without a firearm. You know what I mean? Like it's a
Exactly.
a different
Disparity
scenario.
of force is a lot different for you versus a female. Mhm.
Right, exactly. And so how do you in terms of the classes, you have your general firearms stuff, I think that you would probably get in any class, but what are some of the specific challenges that you address in the class that women need to be concerned about? Is it something for like concealed carry or thinking different ways about to, not have the gun taken from you? Like what are some of the specific things that you teach the women in your class on that
That's a great
arena?
question. I tell them that there's a skill set and a mindset. Skill set is a very finite amount of knowledge that they have to have realistic expectations as to the amount of money they're going to have to throw at that. Quality handguns, quality ammo, quality gear, quality instruction, get a membership at a gun range, etc. But it's the mindset for women that we spend so much time on because there's so many layers to that onion. We're nurture nature
Right.
until we're not. And once we cross that line, somebody's going to be in trouble and it's not going to be us. But getting women to cross that line and talking about that that person that they see in themselves that would give themselves permission to survive, that's what we hit home on the most is trying to drill down into that person. And I tell women that if you don't dive down into the deepest darkest parts of your soul to figure out what you would be willing to become and willing to do, that when or if that happens, that will shatter you, and that's PTSD. So we talk a lot about the mindset. And I deal with women that have had, I don't know what we can say on the show, but all kinds of, you name it. And to try and help them through that mindset and even get them to the range, like the poor woman that was duct taped to a chair and uh, done unspeakables to her body with a pistol, and trying to get her to go out to the range and load one, shoot one, cry. All the women were like, "You got this, sis. You can do it. You can do it." And she got through all of my guns, 5 rounds each, and she was so proud of herself. But so that's what I'm dealing with is the mindset for women. And I have that simulation virtual range, which is amazing. I have just under 1,000 scenarios on there.
Hmm.
And so I had a defense attorney that had 3 little girls. She was standing there And on the scenario, a guy hops out of his car and she pulls her gun up and she goes, I guess I just let him shoot me. I said, that's okay. Have a seat. Somebody else will raise your little girls and tell them why you thought his life was more important than their life. And she goes, oh, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. So then she gets back up and engages because she forgot what she was fighting for. So, no, but you have to think those things through before they happen. And that's what I do a lot in class is to try to remind women of that person in them. And I ask that person to step forward and take the class. And you just see a whole shift in their body language. Because a lot of women depend on their spouse to protect them. But what if they're taken out? What are you gonna how wouldn't it be nice, ladies, for your husbands or spouses or whatever to be able to relax a little bit and knowing that you've got their back? How great would that feel, you know? And so I try to bring them down a path, but it's a process, you know, and it's something I've become really good at over the years, and pride myself. Even when I had the equestrian center, most of my students were women, and so teaching them to think through fear when you're on a 1,200-pound animal's back, you can't just stop the world and figure it out and then move forward. So thinking through fear, but I think the number one thing that women get out of my classes is how to create boundaries. If we don't have boundaries and we don't have consequences for somebody hitting up to those boundaries, then the risk is worth it. Think about that. And fear is always based in the lack of knowledge. No matter if you're afraid of the boogeyman under your bed when I was a little kid, or it's always based in the lack of knowledge. So knowledge is power. Knowledge gives you options, and understanding that the brutality of violence is real. Evil is real. Evil doesn't ask you who you voted for before it crosses your threshold. Evil is real. It's not academic for a lot of women because they've experienced it. So it's the only one that wins in a violent act is the one doing the violence. And so I try to get women on that brainwave. Now, do they stay there? No. I also teach women that I'm very feminine. Just because I carry a gun every day, I don't have to be anything different than who I am. But by God, I could step into my masculine in a heartbeat because I have boundaries. Um, and so, but I can go back. So having that flexibility of being able to step into your masculine to defend yourself or to stand up for yourself or to have boundaries is mandatory. And, I teach them if they're grocery shopping to stay in the moment, get in their car, lock their door, leave, don't sit in your car, don't be on your phone, all of the things, of basic safety. But some women, that's the first time they've ever heard that. And it's shocking to me. But,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
no, yeah, I do. There's a lot of interesting psychology there because, male aggression is something that we learn from a very young age, right? So we're always in some kind of physical conflict from the time
sure.
we're 5, 6 years. I have a son, he's 6 years old.
Yeah.
We have to deal with his male aggression and physical conflict with him from the time that he's little. I also have a daughter, and they're more of a social aggression, right? So to have to take that, to have to take a woman from a much lower baseline for aggression than a man, because most men that walk into a gun store or walk into a gun range, they're going to have some baseline of aggression or some experience with it, right? For themselves personally, like having to deal with it personally. So that is an interesting psychological problem to have to contend with. So
Because your
um,
baseline of normalcy is different than my baseline of normalcy.
right.
And my baseline of normalcy is different than most women's baseline of normalcy because of my profession and what I've
Right.
chosen to do. So we're all different. So to be able to hit on all cylinders, I use kinetic, audit, and visual training aids to be able to, because everybody learns a little bit differently. So studying how people learn, I think instructors need to do. But it's the stories I've heard. I had a woman who was a trauma nurse in Israel for terrorist attack victims for
Mm.
20 years in class 2 weeks ago. And to hear the stories and just knowing how resilient women really are. But she wants a gun. She's back here in the States now and to defend herself. So, and then I, it's hard when I take my laser shot system to sportsman shows and things like that, and I have a bunch of guys come up and shoot. Their skill set doesn't match reality. They think they're good, but they're really not. So I drill that down in these women that they need to be really good with that firearm or don't carry it. I always say, listen, I'm not teaching you how to knit. I'm teaching you how to carry something that is, you know, um, extremely dangerous. Another thing, I get a lot of anti-gunners in my class too, and I say, what's funny? I went to a party a few years ago, and everybody was drinking cocktails. It was at a home, and all night long, this big knife sat in the kitchen where people were cutting their limes and stuff for their drinks. Nobody said a word, and I thought to myself, if I put my gun there, everybody would freak out. So we see that knife a lot. We know what a paper cut feels like. We know what it might feel like to slice our finger with the knife. So because we use that tool all the time, we're familiar with it. Then I say, what about we're going 65 miles an hour down a 2-lane highway and only two little yellow lines are dividing us? We will trust that driver coming at us to not cross those yellow lines to hit us. We do it every day. And anti-gunners, I tell them some of those people in those cars you're trusting have firearms on them or in their car. But if you saw that same person that you trusted here in public with a gun, you'd lose your mind. So it's what we see and what we use every day a lot, we get used to. So guns are the exact same. The more we see them, the more we use them, the more knowledge we have, the fear dissipates, and then the more options we give ourselves.
Well, and I really like your approach with regards to, the setting of the boundaries, because the best case scenario or the best use scenario is you have a woman come in, she learns how to, manage the firearm, she learns how to set boundaries for herself, and her being able to do that so she never gets to that violence, right? So
Yep.
that she's able to avoid the violence or to able to deal with it if it does happen. So it's a preventative. We want to be proactive, not reactive.
Yep.
And I think having a safe place for women to go to learn, I'm very much in favor of that. And especially because you have an entire brick and mortar
Yep.
location to
A
know
great store,
for
great
that.
location.
Yeah, because like at my gun range, there is a ladies course and there's a ladies club, but it's still a male dominated space,
Right.
right? So it's you when you go in there, you if so for someone to become comfortable, they have to overcome all of that even to get to the class that's for
Yep.
the ladies. So I think that's a very valuable service that you're providing, because some women just won't do that. And
Well,
more.
and I've tried mixed classes before, and the women just clam up. We don't hear the stories. They don't share because maybe the violence that was perpetrated on them was from a male.
Mhm.
So they and then I always feel bad having men in class because I love men. Don't get me wrong. I we need good men. I love men. And I just use the example as men as the violent, assailant because it's just the easiest. But women can be just as treacherous. I think women are the most vengeful, vindictive, conniving predator on the face of the planet, because we've had to learn how to be that from a very young age.
Mhm.
I don't have your 6 foot something stature, and I've got to be able to read a room and judge a book by its cover. I always tell women, we're told don't judge a book by its cover. Well, one of my students was walking in downtown Bend on a Friday night at 10:30, and these males were, yeah, had their car parked right on one of the main streets, and they were cussing and being wild, and every fiber in her body said, "Don't judge a book by its cover." I just need to walk right through them. Where she should have gone across the street. Well, she walked right into him, and one of the guys grabbed her and threw her in that car and took her out and brutalized her in that car for 18 hours. So
Mm.
we need to trust our gut. If the hairs rise out on the back of your neck, pay attention to that. Never discount your gut, and read a book by its cover. Now, your internal dialogue doesn't need to become your external dialogue. You don't need to be saying what you're thinking, but at least act on it.
You'll never regret being safe, right? So if there's an extra minor inconvenience, if you wait that extra 10 seconds in the car before you get out and kind of look around and see what's happening, and you're in the store and you look for 10 seconds before you leave, it doesn't cost you anything. Um,
And
you
having
know,
boundaries won't make you always the best liked person. When you have a boundary and you won't put up with something, women get called all kinds of names for not putting up with things. And too bad, you know, too bad.
I think everybody has to deal. I don't think that's an exclusively woman female problem. I think it's just in different arenas that they have to deal with that. And I think
That's true. Good point. Yeah.
But
Valid.
I mean, and what I mean by that is that I think the fundamentals of firearms are the same in terms of for safety, and everyone wants a desire
Yeah,
to be safe. Everyone wants a desire to go home at night to their families, and there is a lot of overlap between men and women with regards to firearms.
yeah,
But there are unique challenges for women. One thing I'm interested to ask you about is I'm a big believer in that there is no one like perfect firearm for everyone. Everyone has to find a firearm that's the fit for them, right?
mhm.
Do you see across the board women gravitating towards specific set of firearms, or is it just like basically um, you know uh, more varied? Does that make sense? Like, is there like a
Yeah, great
female
question.
gun, right?
Yeah, a lot of women will come and bring they have an opportunity to bring their own gun too, and they'll bring a revolver, 38, and they can't press the trigger consecutively to the rear without misaligning their sights because the trigger press is too heavy.
Mhm.
That all the recoil goes right in their hand until they start trying semi-automatics and learn about your grip and your stance, your elbows, shoulders, everything to manage recoil from a semi-automatic. They always choose the semi-automatic. Now, what holds women back as far as make and model and not caliber so much, they're either choosing some of the elderly women that are really arthritic will start out with a 22, like a Ruger SR 22 or something, and then graduate into a 380 or a 9 mil. But it's the trigger reset.
Mm.
So if they've got small little hands and they've got a double stack, even a single stack, and they're holding that gun properly, with that second, where are we? That second thumb well on the side of the gun, they can't reach where am I? They can't reach the reset on the trigger
Mm.
to reset that forward. So they're slapping the trigger or they're pulling their gun or pushing their gun because they can't reach the reset. So that is a determination that most women make when they get to try out all these different guns is can
Right.
they manage that reset and can they manage the recoil? Then we go into full size compact and subcompact, but they understand that the recoil spring gets shorter as that barrel gets shorter, your recoil goes up. Now, some makes and models aren't as exponentially the recoil goes up as others. I enjoy the Glock recoil spring um, in a compact, but even in your subcompacts, you got no pinky on the gun.
Yeah.
So it's grip, a proper grip, and then managing the recoil, but resetting that trigger forward. So it is a and what they want to do with it. Is it for home defense? Then certainly choose a full size. But if they want to, if at some point they're ready to carry that on their body, then they're going to want maybe something that's a little bit more low profile, like a Smith and Wesson M&P Shield Plus or a Glock 43X. I sell a ton of 6-hour P365X macros with hollow center optics on it. Uh,
Mm.
because it holds 17 rounds, but the grip is so small, they can reach that reset all day long. And with the comped and the ported properly slide, which is in front of the barrel, it really does help with muzzle flip during recoil. So it's kind of all over the board, but I do see that they end up choosing once they know how they function a semi-automatic over a revolver.
Yeah, well, and it makes perfect sense because for me, for example, I just go between the Glock 17 and the Glock 19, right? So
Yep.
that's it because I have big hands, and so I can't. If I get one of those smaller guns, like super small concealed
Yep.
carry, my whole hand is over the gun. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So and the
It
nice thing about
is.
the Glocks is that they have basically the same grip between the 17 and the 19.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that's why that's my gun. That's what I like to to conceal carry or to have for home defense.
So
And
those are
it
both double stacked. So that back strap's pretty wide. So what I have to do to drop my magazine is I manipulate it to the side to be able to drop the magazine.
mm,
But I've trained with it for so many years that even when I
right,
have a single stack, I still do it. So what we train, we do. And so there's different little thing, and then how to rack a slide.
right.
We hold it with our strong hand and push with the other. So there's just different techniques that we teach women. Even racking the slide or dropping your magazine, we might have to manipulate the gun just a little bit if you've got smaller hands. If we are, choosing a double stack magazine where that back strap is a little wide and it takes the length of our reset index finger away from us with the proper grip.
Yeah, and but I'm encouraged by this conversation, and I just think it's awesome because you really are you have from zero to like 100, right? So you can take the
Yeah.
whole journey from, hey, you just want to come and talk about it, come to my brick and mortar, let's just chat, to I'm going to help you get this ridiculous license that you have to have and this permit to carry in Oregon. Then I'm going to help
Yeah.
you find the right gun by helping you shoot a lot of different guns. And then we're going to get you trained up on them, right? And work on the psychology. So really it's like you're a one-stop shop
Yeah.
in that niche, and and then you have a supportive environment as well for the women all
Yeah.
support each other. So that's really
Yeah.
great. And I think that's a
Yeah. And it's
model that.
called, but yeah, thank you. Yeah. It's Ladies of Lead Group Therapy. Haha.
Yeah, well, and
Full
I
of
think
all
it's a
this.
model. I think it's a model that can be can spread across, in different geographic areas, right? So
Yeah.
I think, if a gun store or a range was to kind of look at what you do, I think that a lot of gun ranges will have the ladies class, but
Yeah.
you go a lot deeper because it's the whole sort of the
Yeah.
whole thing. So, and
And
there's a
I
lot.
travel too. I travel. It's hard to get into some of these, especially indoor gun ranges across the country because they've already got their program set up. And I've traveled, to other states to try to bring this message and maybe even teach their instructors or take do 2 or 3 classes a year. And it's kind of hard to break into that. But I feel like, again, that moral desperation. I feel like I have value to share and empower women if they would just give me a chance to get in there and then have their instructors watch me and hopefully learn something, and I'd be happy to help them get set up and maybe add to their curriculum a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great, and I really see that there's a lot of value in terms of what you do, and it is, I think too, is that you have a unique insight because of all the time that you've spent. I mean, you've been doing it for a decade, so there's really almost no situation you
In
haven't seen.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you see for yourself in the next? You talk a little bit about traveling, but what do you see kind of in the next 2 to 5 years? Do you have kind of like just doing more of the same, or do you have any other plans in terms of expansion? Kind of where you at right now with your
If the
future
economy
plans?
turns around and we get a better administration and the economy turns around, then I would like to open up more locations, to be
Hmm.
honest with you. Probably not in Oregon, but
Hmm.
I'd go east and open up a few more. I've looked into franchising, but I just lose too much of the control with that. I still might be able to do it, but being an NRA training counselor, I can certify my own instructors and then give them my curriculum and have them follow that. But I would like to grow because so many more women out there need to hear, this information, and my goal is to reach women before the violence, not after. I've trained so many women, after the fact, that I hope that women can learn from the stories they're hearing so that they can not ever let that happen to them. And that's, I think, where my passion is to reach as many women as possible. So if anybody on here can help me do that, give me a call.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and I said I'd love to
Yeah.
have you on the show again in, like, maybe
Yeah.
6 months or so to kind of see kind of how things are going and the growth. How do people find you? Obviously, your website is ladiesoflead.com. Where are you on socials?
I'm on TikTok at Ladies of Lead, Instagram and Facebook at Ladies of Lead. Um,
Are you on
and
Twitter?
I don't do Twitter that much, but I do have a YouTube channel, Ladies of Lead Group Therapy YouTube channel.
This is my weekly where I encourage all people in the firearms business to get on Twitter because it's I think one of the few places where you can actually like gun Twitter is pretty robust, and you don't get demonetized immediately for having firearms content. So I think it's definitely something to consider. But
Yeah,
um,
I have it. I'm looking at it right here on my computer, and I have Truth Social, of course. But yeah, you know what? I probably and I have LinkedIn. So I should be more active on Twitter. But thank you for that.
and all of your socials are on uh ladiesoflead.com. And if they want to reach you personally, is there an email they can send you an email at if they
Yep,
want to get more information?
ladies of lead USA at gmail.com.
Ladiesofleadusa@gmail.com. Great. Well,
LADIES.
it has been fantastic to chat with you, and like I
Thank you,
said,
Dave.
is I've learned a lot. It's going to help me chat with my wife even about some of these topics and see what she has to say about
I
it.
have a great online class too at ladiesoflead.com. I sell that all across the country. That anybody could take the online class, and it's extremely thorough.
Perfect. Great. Well, yeah, I'll definitely Make sure there's a link to the website on this below after this interview, and stay on after we after I stop the recordings. I do want to chat with you about something. So,
Okay,
but once
thank you.
again, yeah, Sharon, thank you for coming on, and I can't wait to have you on the show again.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to it.